Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. And today's topic is nurture or nature.
That's right.
How your early life environment shapes your life as an adult.
Yes, our continuing series on nature versus nurture.
And last episode we talked about genetics and DNA and how that actually can have a big impact on your personality, your body, your eye color, and all those things. But I didn't realize that it had so much to do with our personality and how we react to things. But what did we talk about last time is how much DNA, what percentage of that is genetic and what is environment?
Yeah, so it comes from an incredible researcher named James R. Flynn. He's from New Zealand, and he's really one of the experts in intelligence and IQ in the environment as well. So I have a quote from him to get us started. He says, "The mind is more muscle than we once believed. It is something that we must continuously exercise to attain and maintain peak fitness."
So we have to exercise our brain.
Use
Those
it or
word
lose
puzzles.
Use it or lose it. And so last time we saw, he came up with this incredible idea, right? He said, if you put everything we know about genetics, IQ testing together, about 40% of our intelligence, our personality, our success, everything essentially about us, 40% comes from genetics, 40% comes from the environment, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and then 20% is chance.
So we have a success gene, a wealth gene.
No.
Can I activate my wealth gene?
Yeah,
I know a lot of people would ask that, right?
Well, people that talk that way or sell that kind of stuff, from our perspective, and this is based on the science that we know exists, the research, that's not the way it works.
You can't find the gene, the
No.
actual code, because it'd be lines of code for them to.
Right, but it's also that it's an interaction of genes. In other words, yes, you can identify certain genes that are dormant or asleep or missing or something, mutated, but it's the interaction of genes, actually the way they're expressed from the environmental pressures or demands that results in the expression of that gene. So it's always a gene-environment interaction.
So even someone who looks at your genetics and puts you in a category of your personality makeup, just looking at the DNA is not a way to do that, because you said it's a combination, it's a very complex system that we're working with and interaction with the environment. So a lot of people, I know there was a debate, is it nature or nurture? And
Yeah,
I think
it's still going on.
Yeah, still going on. But I think one of the ways that they really can see the difference between nature and nurture is in twin studies.
Yes.
Because the genetics are exact. It's two people with the exact same gene makeup are having in two different environments. We see the impact on the environment.
Yeah.
And also the impact on the genetics, regardless of the environment.
That's right. So especially identical twins who have been separated at birth and raised in different environments, you can tease out then what impact that environmental difference have on their genetic expression. Right.
So another example of environment. So how would you let's describe environment, just so we know what framework is. So genetics is the DNA, our body, our inheritance. We have epigenetics, like we talked about last time, which turn on and off certain genes. So there's a complex system of genetics in us. But then the environment is what? The environment is how much we're loved, if we're a wealthy house, poor house, if we have friends, if we don't have friends, all that.
All those things, but there's an easier way to think about it. Think about culture.
Mm-hmm.
And in America, we're used to thinking that we don't have culture, that culture exists in other places in other cultures, but that's not true. Everyone has a culture.
Well, I know from New Jersey, there's a certain culture in New Jersey, and I would never think I would have anything in common with someone from Texas. We think of cowboys, and although it's not all that, but the stereotypes. But even then, even in the U.S., there's different states, and whatever country you're in, I'm sure there's different regions that have their own culture, their own even accents.
Yeah, and then there's subcultures within those cultures, but culture then gives us a framework, because if you think about culture, it gives us the paradigm, the worldview in which we exist, and in other words, where the genes then express themselves, and also the pressure on the individual as to what language they're going to learn, what kind of foods they're going to eat, what is considered normal behavior.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yes, because
even children, right? You were doing assessments on children. You said different cultures see what child rearing should be and what it shouldn't be, and every culture has their own way of disciplining children or letting children have more freedom than others.
Yeah, eye contact in some cultures, eye contact is encouraged, and in other cultures, it's considered rude to directly look at a person in the eye. So
also affection is cultural too.
Yeah.
Some people, it's like not okay. Other families are very affectionate. So.
The way emotions are demonstrated, expressed, all part of culture. And the thing about culture is you don't see it until you step outside of it. You think, well, it's just the way things are, and that's the way things should be, because you're in the bubble of your culture.
You don't even notice it.
No, but when you travel and you go to another country and another culture, you notice it, right? You notice, things are done differently here. The food is different. The way people behave is different. The way their body language is expressed, all those things are different.
And so how does the family culture, like in Jungian coaching, we talk about the persona, and that we create, we get born into this body, we learn, like we're in this environment, and our genetics, but also our environment interacting with those genes create, and then we have this, our psyche develops this persona, that basically the mask we wear. And so how does culture create that persona? And so we think it's our natural personality, but it's partly like if we're introvert, extrovert genetically, but there's also the environment, and then it forms like what we think is acceptable.
Yeah, so you have those 40% of inheritance from your genetic makeup, your genotype. Then the environment, the culture, and of course the family is housed in that culture, so that the family is using the norms, the what's considered normal behavior and appropriate training and parenting to raise you, to relate to you as a child. And so you're getting the family's interpretation of their cultural environment fed to you in that way, right? You're experiencing directly, as you're starting to grow up, your family in that cultural context.
Well, I think about the different levels of your life. One of the things that is prominent for me is the culture of money in our family, how we see money, how we see success, how we look at education, what is, you hear your family say, like worried about money all the time. So that's part of the culture, is to, look at your bills and to imagine stepping outside of that and not worrying about the bills and having lots of money would be weird. Like you would you want to stay in your culture. So not only does it shape you, but it also in individuation, it limits you because you want to stay with your family. And one of my clients long time ago, she and I see this very common with a lot of people, is everyone in her family was overweight, but she was trying to lose weight. And she said every time she lost weight, she felt like she wasn't a part of the family anymore, because the whole family was about overeating, overindulging, drinking, and just okay with being chubby, and like there was no problem with it. And then her being thin, she kind of felt
Sure.
like different. So we see that kind of challenge too. Not only does it limit our own kind of sense of what's possible, but even if we try to escape it, it's almost like a weight that pulls us back to that culture.
Yes.
And keeps us in that limitation.
Yeah, because the tendency that we are born with, and this is genetically, right, that we want to fit in. We want to be accepted by the group, especially the family and the parents. So that conflict that develops as individuals, that's where you get the kind of the rebellious element that some people feel like I need to rebel against this and find my own way.
You know, it's a great example of this is Academy Oscar-winning movie Coda, where the woman, she grew up, her family was deaf, and she was the only one who was hearing. Yeah. And it's almost like that bubble of their culture, that she wanted to go and do her own thing, and how that conflict of, I don't want to leave my family, this is my comfort. And so we start to, so she had the genetics of having hearing, but the culture, the environment was non-hearing, and that's the bubble, right?
Exactly. And it's a very powerful conflict that individuals experience. And some people will negate their own individuation in order to fit in with the family and stay there and, kind of carry on the culture. And others will rebel and go their own way.
But don't you think that a lot of people don't even know that they're rebelling, or don't even know that they're stuck? They kind of just, they don't know why they're not taking those actions toward their goals. They don't know why, they keep going into the same patterns or the same type of relationships, or they can't lose weight, or they can't quit a habit that they can't, kick. And they trying to find the root of it is, we should examine, well, what environment did I grow up in? And we can't just say, like a lot of people talk, just weight loss, for example. A lot of people say, well, your genetics, you have bigger hips in our family, so just, that's just the way it is. And but there is that other element, like you said, there's 20% chance, and then there's also the environment. You put yourself in another environment, and then there's that chance that you can break free. And that's always a choice. I mean, you don't have to change. You don't have to lose weight or make a lot of money or have better relations. You could stay happy being alone. It's not, good or bad, but there's people that feel this stuckness, but they don't know why. So this would account for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say we go back to Freud and Jung, those early experiences of the family have a powerful influence on the way you see yourself and the world for the rest of your life, unless you do inner work, meaning you actually do that individuation process where you're free from that conditioning, and then you can make your own choices. But most people do not undergo individuation. They simply follow the patterns or rebel against it, like we were saying. But in rebelling against it, you're still tied to it. You're simply saying, I don't want that lifestyle. I want to be different. And so you're always keeping it in mind as well, even though you're rebelling against it.
It's like if you grew up poor and then you're trying to be rich to get away from that poverty, and then you end up keep creating those same realities. That another movie is The Greatest Showman. P.T. Barnum grew up very poor, and then all his ego was so attached to being that over the top and successful, so he can fit in with the culture, and he kept unconsciously, there was like always something that happened that he'd lose the money again, and that's because his early life conditioning was, you don't have money, that's your identity. And even though consciously we change, we want to change our identity, we want to improve our life, that don't you think that there's part of our ego that doesn't identify with our vision and our aspirations? It identifies with what it knows.
Yeah, well, so in research and in academia, money is a dirty word, so they don't use that. They talk about SES, socioeconomic status. But it's a big factor. We know if you're born into poverty, your chances of making it are highly reduced because from the get-go, you have less access to books, to games, to educational information. Even working, like if you're really poor in a country that you don't get the education, you may not,
you don't have time because you're working. Some countries, kids are working at 13, 12 years old to help the family or on a farm. Years ago, people, the kids would not go to finish school. I think it was 100 years ago, most people didn't even have a education past ninth grade. Most of our population. It's just recent in our recent history where we have.
Yeah, the IQ in general has been rising over the past century.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because of education, access to education.
And so when we think about other aspects, is also emotions, I think, is a big the part of the culture. Do you share emotions? Do you talk about your feelings? Or you just keep it light?
What are feelings?
Keep it light. Let's just, don't bother. And I've had clients who've had parents that say, stop crying. Don't be so emotional. I'll give you something to cry about. That kind of like emotions aren't really honored here. And then other families, it's like, oh, let's talk about how we feel. And the parent actually, it's really the parents expressing their feelings with each other and with the children. Like, I love you, I care about you, and this is how I'm feeling, and being transparent. I think the child learns it's okay to share your feelings. And
there's been some really good long-term, they're called longitudinal studies, where the researcher follows people from the time that they're born.
Those are so interesting.
Till they grow up, and then they look at the numbers and what happens to people that where their parents are divorced, where the difference in socioeconomic status, difference in education, differences in diets, nutrition, and all those really give us a very clear picture of the importance of early environment, early education, early experiences. The better, let's say, the child is treated early on, the more opportunities they're given to hear stories, read books, express themselves through play, through games, the better they do in the long run, in general. Now, there's always exceptions because of that 20% chance.
You're not stuck.
and
that's the good news, right?
Yeah, that's definitely the good news. But it's a lot harder for people that start off in those lower socioeconomic rungs to make it, but not impossible. Definitely, we always hear those stories of people that beat the odds, right? Against all odds, they make it.
Or there's people that have all the gifts and the financial support and the education, and they don't really do anything with their lives either. So you can have all those things in the great environment, but you could sabotage it because I've worked with people who have come from very wealthy families, and they actually wanted to fail to resent the parent, like for being so pushy, and you got to be the best, you got to be the best. And they had everything provided for them, this silver spoon, but they were just like, no, I just want to hightail out of here. And I want to be a bohemian and travel in a van across the country and do something, like the opposite of what my parents did. Also, too, there's a lot of people that do the same thing with creativity. They break free and they have these, I'm not going to be stuck.
I'm not going to, what is it?
Live a boring life.
I'm not going to give away my shot, or...
Yeah, they're not going to take away my shot.
Something like that.
Yeah. Hamilton, that was all about his environment. He lost his parents. He had nothing, but he had this vision. And so he would be a good example of that 20%, that genetically and maybe and environmentally, he didn't have it going for him. Well, actually, genetics, he was very smart. So he had that going for him. And that genetic piece and the chance piece put him in the right environment to cultivate it. I have another question, too, is something I've heard and just wanted to bring this up, is they were talking about children and 2 classrooms, and you've probably heard this study, where the smart kids... And then there was a class with kids that were kind of slow, but they told the teachers the opposite. So they told the teacher, you're going to teach the smart kids, which is really the slow kids, and you're going to teach the slower kids, but they were really the smart kids, and how the smart kids, their grades went down, and how the slower kids' grades went up because of the teacher's perspective. So when we think about environment, it's also what the parent is projecting on the child and demonstrating or believing what's possible for the child as well.
Very much so.
And that's not from the parent, but that's how they were raised, and it's kind of passed down in a way.
Yeah, because
that attitude.
As children, we read our parents and our teachers' expectations of us. Even if they never say it explicitly, they never tell us, this is what I expect from you. It's communicated through their voice, through their body language, through the attitude that they have towards us. So if we get the message that, I don't expect much from you, you just cruise, just do your best and don't worry about excelling or doing incredible work. That's what you do, right? Because your job as a kid is to follow the lead of the parent, the teacher, your peers, etc. And so expectation has a lot to do with it. So if you have young kids, definitely expect great things from them. Not in an obsessive way to where they feel like, you're trying to live through them.
Not like a King Richard, like you're going to be the best tennis player in the world.
Well, I don't know. Is that bad?
It's maybe not.
Again, it depends, I guess, on the way it's communicated.
Yeah.
Right. That if you say, I'm going to withdraw my love from you if you don't do that.
Yeah.
If you don't do what I expect, that's not a good message for a child.
Do you think that sometimes parents project their own misgivings, and then they try to project the things that they didn't accomplish in their life, or where they have their shortfalls on the child, not unconsciously realizing it?
Yeah.
Can you talk
absolutely.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, Jung mentions that he says one of the saddest things is the parent projecting their unlived potential onto the child and expecting the child to fulfill that need that they have. Yeah, and that's totally unfair, because now you're placing your stuff on the kid and expecting them to fulfill your needs.
And would it be too that, what about critical parents and that kind of environment where you're always criticized, or whatever you do isn't good enough? How does that impact the child and their ability? Is it, for me, it would always felt like I was afraid to make a mistake because I would be criticized or judged for it.
Yeah.
And then now I would do it to myself because that's the inner dialogue. And so I'd love to hear about that too, how that inner voice is really our parents.
Yeah,
we hear.
So as children, we internalize our parents' voice and their attitude towards us, so that they don't have to be there. They don't have to be present anymore. They're in our head, and we hear their voice telling us, "Don't do that," or "Yes, you should.
You should have done better."
Yeah, or "Why can't you be like your brother or
Yeah.
your sister," or something like that, right? That's internalized, and so it doesn't mean it's pathological. That's what we're meant to do, but you want to be conscious of it. Otherwise, that voice will continuously run your life. And the whole idea of becoming an adult is to be free from that conditioning, to make your own choices.
So what about a child whose environment keeps changing? Hear a lot of this of you have a divorce, or you have to go to a new school and you're really young. That really impacts the child as well, because they're in different environments and it's not consistent.
Yeah, it would depend on what kind of support they have. And often what it boils down to is the child included in the conversation of moving, of changing schools, instead of just being told this
Tolerate
is what we're
it.
doing,
Yeah.
and get used to it and figure it out. Often parents think, oh, he's just a kid. He's only 6 or 7. He doesn't know what's going on. That's not what's happening. Children have the potential for suffering, for experiencing all the emotions we have as adults. It's simply their mind, their cognitive skills aren't at the higher level.
And
but
then
their,
the parent-
their emotions are very well developed.
And then the parent learns that style based on, we're going to talk about parenting styles next time, but
Yeah.
they learn that style from their parents, and they just, if you weren't taught how to communicate, you would be less likely to know how to do that to your children, if that, you basically pass it on. So let's talk about spirituality and people that are, I mean, I've heard both sides. The people that are both atheists and they're looking for some spiritual, they seek spiritual enrichment, and then others brought up in a very strict religion, and they're afraid to leave that religion because of the family, and so that entanglement, that environment too, because a lot of organized religion is community based, and it's very tight knit, and almost like you can't escape it in a way, or you feel guilty going beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, most people these days, they identify as spiritual but not religious, and if you often they're triggered by people that talk about God or something.
Don't say
like
the
that.
word God, the G word.
Yes, but it's part of the culture, right? That where the culture is at. So we're definitely influenced not only by the family but by the culture in general, because mass media, television, the internet, it's all feeding us ideas, attitudes that are absorbed unconsciously. We're not even aware of what is going in there because there's so much content. Or we're watching 2 to 6 hours of television per day.
I know, it's a lot.
5,000 commercials a week for kids, So all these incredible kind of programming that's going on, we're absorbing that in our mind.
So can I ask you a question about that? So when we watch a movie or a television show, and our psyche is actually experiencing it as if it's happening to us in some way, or where we're actually there. Like we get so involved that we feel like we're living the characters. And how does that affect our psyche, especially if you're watching like zombie movies and horror films, or like tragedies all the time, or like a true crime and stuff like that?
Most of us are able, of course, to distinguish what is reality and what is a movie. But you always hear of people that don't have that filter, right? They have difficulty screening out what is fantasy and what is a movie and what is reality.
But doesn't it still affect you if you're watching things that are like aggression and destruction?
Well, the news. I mean, all you have to do is look at the news.
But I'm talking about like Game of Thrones. A lot of people are like, it's so violent. And what does that do to our psyche to watch a violent show? Like, does that? I guess if you can discern that you're doing it, or does it still like?
I think it goes back to what do you consider human nature. I mean, there is a certain satisfaction, or
It's
else,
like our shadow that we feed.
Yeah, or else people wouldn't watch violent scenes over and over and hundreds of them, right? But we go see horror movies, we go see violent movies, we get some kind of enjoyment out of them.
Well, I find it fascinating that a lot of people, true crime is really very popular, but also reality TV, that drama craziness where people are fighting and acting out of control. And we are just fascinated, like not me and you, but some people are really fascinated by that. And they just get so there's some kind of pleasure that we get, like, because we are not allowed as a persona to express that craziness, that wildness, but there's part of us that's like, ooh, like, kind of living it in some way.
Yeah. It is kind of a vicarious living through the characters and through the action that's going on in the movie.
So that's why we feel that satisfaction?
Well,
even like killing the enemy, like the sword through the evil person. There's some satisfaction and
the sense of justice. But also let's say we are storytellers as human beings. What did we do when we didn't have any technologies? We sat around the fire and told stories, right? We used our imagination. We told each other stories about hunting, about things that happened to us, love stories, and the technology simply amplifies that. So it's the same story, the
same
adventure,
characters,
is simply told now through mass media.
And so when we talk about what our parents teach us as kids in the environment, one of the things that I think is really important as an adult is how do we resolve conflicts with other people?
Yeah.
And we talk about like, the heroes, with the sword and the fights. But in real life, regular life, we don't have swords or battles. But what can we learn from our parents about how to, when we do have a conflict with someone, or altercation or fight, or someone's unhappy with us, or boss that's jabbing us, like how do we deal with those conflicts and marriages? That's also part of the environment.
Absolutely. And part of the culture as well.
Mm-hmm. The culture, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to scream at each other, like almost like it's normal. Like there's some families, it's like you just shout it out and they're like, yeah, but they'll make up later. And it's almost like a normal way of being. And if you're in that environment, you think, okay, I'll just, or physical fighting, we know gets passed down from generation. There's a physicality to
well, it can go either way because remember it's 40-40, 40% genetics, 40% environment, and 20% chance.
So it's not an absolute.
Not an absolute, which saves us because it means that we won't necessarily play out the same pattern as our parents did. But often if we're not really conscious of it and we don't do the self-inquiry, self-examination, we either run away from that pattern, right? So if our parents were used to screaming it out, shouting at each other and throwing things, we say, I don't want anything to do with it.
You have that avoidant
I'm going to avoid it.
personality.
I'm afraid of that, right? I don't want to recreate that. But again, we're kind of caught into it because now we're afraid of it. We're running away from it.
And we create a persona that's the opposite. So a pleasing persona, a person who doesn't want to make waves, someone who plays in the background versus going forward, because the people that were loudest and got the most attention in the family were fighting and it was aggressive. And so, but we're not free to make that. We were like, I don't want to be like them, but you're still making the decision to be not like them. And it's still not freedom.
Yes, or we play out the same pattern, right? Or in moments of stress,
like
and anxiety,
like the Oscars.
It comes out.
Someone is expressing anger in an uncontrolled way. There's the shadow.
Yes, that's it.
And so it's the environment. You can't, if you don't face it and understand and recognize it within yourself, it will act out unconsciously.
Yeah, and I think. This is a failure of my own profession. Psychology hasn't done its job in educating the public on how the mind works. I mean, this is really good information for everyone to have. Parents, kids, couples, individuals, just to have this kind of basic information about how does the mind work. And my profession has not done a good job of disseminating that information. So people depend on pop psychology.
When you say your profession, you mean psychology, the medical model?
Yes. Yeah. And people depend now on information from movies.
Instagram pops. Tip of the day, be nice to your children, and pointing to the thing.
Yes. Yeah. And that's not a good way to do your self-understanding, your self-inquiry.
And so say someone knows that they were brought up in a certain environment, they're trying to escape that environment, maybe like escape their mother's shadow, escape, maybe it's, everyone in the family is like middle class or even struggling to pay their bills all the time and they want to succeed, or maybe everyone in their family is divorced or always has like drama in their relationship. They want to have a loving relationship, or maybe everyone in their family just is unhealthy and they want to be healthy. How would someone make that shift from that biological, environmental culture to them becoming who they really want to be, and do it not in a way to push away the past, but to really make a conscious decision outside of it?
Yeah. So it goes back to this quote that we started with, right? That the mind is more muscle than we once believed. It is something that must be continuously exercised to attain and maintain peak fitness, peak performance. So as adults, and even as young teenagers, you start to get the sense that hey, I can pursue my own interests. But often people believe that, oh, because I've inherited my genes from my parents, that means I'm stuck. I'm going to play out this the same pattern that they did unconsciously. Why we don't even think about it. We just kind of assume that, oh, because my parents were that way or my culture has taught me that way, that's the life I'm going to live. But keep in mind what Flynn's research shows, that 40% of our behavior, of our expression, comes from the genes. So that's not the whole picture, right? That's only 40%. The other 40% is the environment, meaning we have a 40% chance of changing our environment.
So we're not locked into our early life environment because we can create a new environment today.
That's right.
And then we have that extra 20%, like a bonus.
Yes. So that means I can pursue education consciously as an adult, or as a young adult, or even in middle age and older. You can still pursue education. You can retrain your mind, and that will change your genetic expression. So because it is gene environment interaction, you're actually changing the potential of your genes, of your intelligence. So it's never too late. You can join different groups that have different mindsets instead of hanging out with the same people.
It's the high school. It's so funny when I went back to my high school reunion after I became an entrepreneur. It was like I had a different mindset around money, around what's possible. And I went to my high school reunion, and it was like I didn't have anything in common with them. It was just like the conversations were just about their children and, the gossip about who got divorced. And I was like, no one's talking about anything really rich. And I could see that and a lot of them stayed in the same town. And we see a lot of people, those of you who know, you go back home for the holidays and you see your friend from growing up and you're like, they're just kind of still there. They're still in that same bubble. And for me, even moving out of New Jersey, living in Colorado and meeting a whole bunch of different friends most of them were entrepreneurs. And that's what drove me to be an entrepreneur, because I never thought of like that before, of something I'd want. And so having an different environment stimulates even stuff deep within you that your soul has probably planned and wanted to express in this life. And now it's almost like, look at those opportunities that these new environments are showing you. So change your environment, I would say, is the number one thing. We have to do the inner work, but
it's 40%.
Yeah,
that's a big chunk of your possibility there. In other words, you can take the reins of your life, your intelligence, your personality, your abilities. That's a big opportunity that life is giving us to direct our own evolution, our own growth, our own personal development. Then if you consider there's a 20% chance, meaning it's up for grabs as well. So now you got 60% available to you to play with, to design for yourself. You're not stuck in your genetic code. You're not stuck in your culture and your early training. You can now say, this is what I want to do with my life.
And haven't they done studies on like animals and people, of putting them in different environments and how it changes them even physiologically? Absolutely.
It changes your neurochemistry, your physical biochemistry, because we are, as human beings, our whole mind body is an interaction with the environment. So as you step outside your comfort zone and experience new things, it changes who you are, the expression from within.
So joyful experiences could be one of them. And what about nature? I know a lot of people, when they think about shifting themselves, like there's something about nature that's very healing.
Absolutely.
Is it because we're so close to, like, it's more of the pure divine part of ourselves?
Yeah, there's a theory called biophilia, meaning we love nature.
Oh, that's so pretty.
Instinctually.
I got biophilia.
Yeah, because we evolved in it. It's like our mother, right? We grew up in this green world of plants and animals and sky and mud and thunder, and it's our inheritance. But we've isolated ourselves, and this is part of Jung's work as well. He talks a lot about how modern humans have disconnected themselves to
The pavement and
to our own detriment from nature, right? And we're so focused on proving that we're not beholden to nature by creating our technologies and our concrete buildings and all this.
and even working in offices and sitting in our car and going to an office. We don't really like put our feet in the grass anymore. When we were kids, we did that a lot. The wet grass and after the rain in the summer, and just climbing on the ground and laying on the blankets in the sun and just playing around with sticks and playing, seeing the animals, and it's just such a different experience. Yeah. And so environment. I mean, one of the things that I decided to do when I was in my 20s is I started buying flowers for myself every week. On Monday, I would buy a beautiful, fresh set of flowers. And it was just this little thing that put me in an environment, in a space of love. It's like, and people would always say, "Oh, Deborah, is it your birthday?" And I say, "No, someone who loves me very much got them for me." They're like, "Oh, did you meet someone new?" I'm like, "No, I bought them for myself." And they were like, "Okay." But it was just this kind of idea of self-love. And so what do we do can you do today to put yourself in the environment of abundance, of love, of nurturing? Are you watching too much news? Are you not meditating? Are you not being good to your body by nourishing it? Eating foods or drinking too much, and you're your body feels like you're poisoning it, and instead of nurturing it. Just all those things just initially can make such a big impact on a person. You feel good about yourself when you take care of your body.
Yes. So there's always things we can do to change our mind, our brain, our body. And that's the great news, like you were saying, because it means that we can literally take the reins of our life, and it will change. Our mind body will respond to that change.
But mind is important too. Don't just put yourself in a position thinking the environment's going to do it all. It's a mind environment exchange. And there is this saying that the 5 people you surround yourself with really resemble your life, financially, relationships, health. So look at your friends and then look at what you want. Is like, you kind of see, you probably all make around the same amount of money. You probably all have maybe similar eating and social activities. And also the way you have relationships. So if you're with, just a bunch of single friends all the time, and there's no concept of healthy relationships, and you're always complaining that no one's out there, think of that where your mind is in that environment. It's like there's no hope there. Yeah. There's no one there to say that's possible. Yeah. So it's really important. Just that would be something to think about. It. Write down the 5 people you spend the most time with. And what do you think their mindset is? What do you think their financial situation is? And is that match where you want? Not to say get rid of those friends. Maybe it's your mother or your father or your brother. But just to remember that when you're in that cocoon and around them, that your mind will try to, it's like the brain kind of resonates in a way around that, calibrates to their way of thinking and being.
Absolutely. Yeah. You think about how much money you make, how much exercise you do, what kind of activities, what kind of success you have in your life in general. A lot of it is your conditioning, your past experiences. But you can redirect your mind to change all that. And it's the mind that's able to do that.
Yes.
So it's an incredible opportunity, this life that we have.
And it cultivating that desire in the mind to have some different experience than you had. And so don't blame your parents, don't blame your genes, but you can take responsibility of your life today. You can't change the past. You can't change the environment you were in, but like you said, the mind has a muscle, And it's very, it can change. And you can, just like anyone can get puffed up and build up their body, we can do the same thing with our mind. We can change our life. So great conversation. This is very interesting.
And next time we're going to go deeper into parenting styles.
Yes. And which style leads to a self-actualized adult? So those of you who are parents, you may want to pay attention to this so you can have a highly enlightened adult child one day. And then also like really just the styles that the debate on nature nurture again and what these styles do. So very interesting conversation. And then understand the style that you grew up in as well.
Yeah.
And we'll continue the debate. Did your parents screw up your life? Case for and against.
Nature versus nurture.
So we'll see you next week. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.